In Scripture, when somebody died, they would actually take around 40 days, about 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And they would outwardly mourn with sackcloth and ashes. They would take a garment and rent it and tear it so that people kind of see where I am, and the community would rally around you. And it reminds me of what the Bible talks about, how there is a time and a season that should be dedicated to mourning. And because we don't really just follow that simple instruction or that simple template. Like, we will lose a mom or a spouse or a dad and try to get back into the work rhythm, 4 or 5 days later or a week later. And that's just not how we are constructed, to deal with loss. Yeah. And so what happens is, not that this 40 days or 6 weeks, cancels all of it or deals with all of it, but it gives you a head start to the return or transition back into normal life. But because we try to jump right back into normal life and work and cooking and bills, I think the grief begins to come out of us in unhealthy, unforeseen ways over years.
Life can be fast-paced, strenuous, and flat-out overwhelming. Life transitions and taboo topics can make it hard to catch your breath. Welcome to Breathe, a podcast that enables you to slow down, get your bearings, and engage in real conversations where no topic is off limits. Breathe is presented by Breath of Life, hosted by David Person and speaker-director Pastor Debleaire Snell.
Welcome to Breathe. I'm David Person, and it is good to see my brothers around the table, and I'm looking into the camera. I'm imagining our audience. That's why I was looking over there, imagining the thousands who watch, and we appreciate you. But it's good to see my brothers, Pastor Snell.
Yes, sir. Good to see you.
Indeed.
Yes, sir.
And Pastor Kirk, what's
man.
up?
Yeah.
And we got Dr.
Hey,
John Ruffin. What's happening, my man?
What's going on?
Welcome, my friend.
Let me correct you guys. I'm not a doctor.
Oh.
A lot of people call me that.
Okay.
I am not a doctor. Let me make sure that's clear.
Well, you may not
but
have
I'm
the
a master's
degree.
level
You present.
counselor with a licensed LPC.
Okay.
I'm an LPCS,
which
means I supervise up-and-coming counselors.
Got it. Good.
Well, you present like a doctor.
I know. I was telling my wife, I said, I need to just go ahead
and get it.
Go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
I've done the work.
Or
so
you
I might
can
as well
say,
do it.
everybody thinks I'm a doctor anyway, so I might as well not.
You balance it. You can balance it.
No. I don't want to drown the vision God has given you. So.
But, it not being a doctor gets me into doors that you wouldn't think of.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So people can kind of just relate to me and not feel like I have to be in the upper echelon.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you figured out how to work that thing.
Yeah.
Man.
Sure have.
You gotta find your own path. So, yeah.
Speaking of figuring things out, the holidays present many people with the challenge of how to figure out dealing with loneliness and grief. Could be due to death, could be due to divorce, could be other situations or scenarios. But Pastor Snell, a time that is supposed to be joyful, lots of celebration, it's not that way for everybody.
So,
what have you seen, as a pastor?
The longer I pastor, the more acute my sensitivity has become to how hard and actually harsh the holidays may be. I think that, throughout the course of the year, we are all taxed by life in some way. But more directly for those who lose loved ones, there is something about maybe the busyness of the year that may distract the mind, that might deter the mind. Again, those are not necessarily healing activities. They're just distracting activities. But there's something about once, I guess, maybe the break kicks in, life slows down, work rhythms are interrupted, and they're noticing everybody in their orbit in these festive moments with family and friends. And the person that they've laid next to in a bed for 40 years is no longer there. Or this is their first or second Christmas without mom or without dad or without grandparent. Or maybe you've aged to a point where you no longer have siblings, or just life has pushed you so far apart, or just through age you can't travel to be with siblings. Your children have their own lives, and they're establishing their own order and their own holiday traditions. And I'm realizing, more and more. And then really, it's funny, this is anecdotal. I do not have I have not measured this, but for many people, the grief is fresh. I can't explain it. It just feels this way, that somewhere between the end of October and December, that's just when some of those wonderful seasoned saints that are at the end of their life cycle, that's just when they let go and say, I'm ready to take my rest. And I feel like sometimes there is a lot of death that occurs at the end of the year. Again, I told myself I want to do a study. I wish I could track it, but just from a pastoral standpoint, I know my funeral count picks up exponentially in those last couple months of the year. And I can't really point it. I can't say this is the why. And so I know that the holidays, it affects people very differently.
Yeah.
And so,
I'm thinking to sort of piggyback on what you're saying, Pastor, I'm thinking even just this week, and, I got a call from a woman who woke up in the morning and her husband was dead.
Yep.
Wow.
Laying right next to her all night. He was dead.
Wow.
Learned about a woman whose husband had put his hands on her.
Yeah.
And so now their divorce, Pastor Nugent, is imminent. And I'm thinking the holiday season is going to be a marker for both of those
people
in different ways.
Wow. Yeah. Because loss doesn't just happen through death. Loss can happen through separation and just transitions as well. Different seasons of life. You talked about that as well. I mean, so because there are going to, as your kids get older, they develop their own rhythms, their own norms, their own traditions even. And sometimes that includes coming home to mom and dad or grandma and grandpa. Sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
So, it does take on different sides and effects to it.
Yeah. What do you see, John, in your practice as you work with people and families as it relates to dealing with the holidays and loneliness and grief?
Yeah, I'm listening to you guys, and I'm just like, man, this is so true. So seasonal affective disorder is real. When the season comes where it's darker, longer, and it's colder, and
that's true.
Everything is kind of slowed down or at least more dreary. People get into a funk. They start to, their hormone levels start to lower. They have a tendency to be less motivated. And energized to do things. And then this disruption comes. Thanksgiving, Christmas, where you're supposed to be connecting with family, having fun, and you've just been barely making by. You've just been in a routine, holding on for dear life, and now all of a sudden you have to put on this face of joy and excitement and family connection, and that's scary. That's scary for people, and of course one of our defense mechanisms is to run, to hide. And so I love the idea of what you're saying, like, why are more people lonely when in this type of season where they're supposed to be connected and excited? And it's because they're recognizing, subconsciously, of course, recognizing that they are not prepared to accept this joy or accept the excitement of the holidays, or what it may bring. They're not prepared. They've just been surviving.
So Pastor Snell, earlier, John had said he wished he could do a study. Do you have any kind of data that really shows what percentage of people actually wind up dealing with loneliness and grief and loss during the holidays? Have any studies been done? Are you aware of any?
So there's been some research done, and what I've uncovered, up to about 55%. So there's some different opinions and research, but around 55% of Americans experience loneliness during the holidays.
55%.
55%.
That's over half.
That is.
And they gave their top 5 reasons why.
Okay.
Wow.
So
lay that out. I'm curious to see what that is. Okay. Yeah.
So one of the first reasons, of course, is death.
Yeah.
Okay.
conflict with family members that have pushed you away.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Expectations that you don't feel like you can meet.
Wow. Expectations is heavy.
That is
That's
heavy. Yeah, I never thought about that.
Now,
Yeah.
when you say expectations, you're talking about things that are related to how much money you can spend, or
Everything.
where you can go, or what?
Imagine going and everybody's comparing. Hey, what are you doing?
Right.
What was your gift?
What are you doing?
What are you getting?
What are you doing? And think about people who struggle to get home.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people, man, you
Can
don't
you
know
even
what
afford to
they're
travel?
doing
Yeah.
to travel. They're taking out loans.
Oh, my.
They're borrowing money.
Wow.
Credit card spending goes up in the holidays. People go into so much debt in the holidays that it take them the rest of the year to get out of it.
Yeah.
If at all.
And it's not just
If at all.
And it's not just gifts. It's just to be able to travel.
Yeah,
To
just
be
able to
with
travel.
family and friends. Okay.
Which is a natural, normal
Yeah.
desire.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
There's nothing extravagant or luxurious
Yeah.
about that. Just, hey,
You're just traveling.
Want to see my people.
Yeah, just want to see my people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just to be able to travel.
Well, speaking of that,
You have two
go
more
ahead.
things, I think. What were those
I'm
last
sorry.
two things?
Did you have
Yeah.
others?
So the other one was the fear of connecting with someone and losing them.
Okay.
Yeah. So I know this is so.
The fear. Opening yourself up.
So when you've experienced loss, you don't want to experience it no more. So what you do, one of the self-defense mechanisms that happen is I stay away from people because long as I'm not connected with them, I don't have to worry about losing them.
Yeah.
And so I stay away from them because I don't want to connect with them. And then the last one is social anxiety disorders.
Yeah.
So you've learned. We've gotten to a place where you conditioned yourself to not be able to connect with people socially, and we living in a world now. I just did a podcast called "Compensating for Common Sense," and what we've done is we've made it too easy to communicate without communicating. So
What do you mean by that? What does that mean?
I feel you. Okay.
So we can hide behind a keyboard and not really socially connect with people.
Okay.
We can send texts. Think about emails and texts instead of a phone call or instead of in person. There used to be a time if you wanted to talk to someone, you had to go to their home and hope that they were there.
Yeah.
This is so true.
Now
And
you can.
they'd invite you in. They'd give you a glass of water. You'd sit down. You'd ask them how their family's doing. There's a whole lot more connection that happens in that experience. That's good.
You had to navigate disruption because if you wasn't able to adjust to disruption, you wouldn't be able to connect with anyone because that was just the environment. Now it's so convenient that we've lost the skill.
Yeah.
We've lost the skill. So when you have someone who's been texting all last 6 months from their bedroom, now all of a sudden actually have to go face to face and connect with the nuances of your moods and your behaviors and trying to get on your schedule, get on your link.
Yeah.
It's scary.
That's crazy.
How much of that is generational? Is that, folks in our age group, is that really prevalent with us, or is that more of a young people thing?
It's a profession thing. See, you're pastors, so you have to connect with people. But what if an engineer? I have engineers who don't talk to people at all.
Wow.
And they dread having to go home.
Wow.
Yep.
They dread having to go home because they have to, people who knew them before they were, engineers and able to kind of work from their home and their office, the little Joe who could rub their head and get all over them and hang on them and push them around and call them little buddy from before. That interferes with their bubble.
My gosh.
And so they're like, oh my goodness, they're going to just get into my bubble and they're going to see me. They're going to see what's going on with me. And so that's what's happening in a lot of homes is people are like, man, I'm going into a place where I know I'm going to be touched.
Wow. I guess COVID has probably exacerbated that. Right?
Yeah. Very much so. COVID gave an excuse to people to stay stuck. A lot of people enjoyed COVID because that was an excuse to keep their distance, to put up a mask and stay. So a lot of people were comfortable with it. And then when it started opening up, there were some people who was like, I'm not going back.
Yep.
I'm not going back. I'm staying right here. I'm not going back.
That's heavy.
And th've given COVID the excuse. It's COVID. COVID, but they can't even do that anymore.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, I was
a lot of what. Oh, go ahead.
No, I went to a conference recently, a creator conference, and of course, as content creators, you don't have to go and see anybody. You just create your videos at home.
Yeah.
And one of the guys that was at the conference, he shared with the group, because they split everybody into these kind of groups, and you kind of experience the conference together in your group. But he shared with our group that he came to the conference as an exercise to get himself back out because he had dug himself into a hole. And he was actually doing it as a social experiment, but it backfired on him. He wanted to see how little interaction can I have with other human beings. So he started ordering in his food, started having shopping brought to him, started having cleaners, the DoorDashes, all of the different things. Zero interaction. He was able to achieve that for almost a year. So now it's like I'm trying to dig myself back out. So coming to the conference was one of his bucket list items to really get himself and re-immerse himself back into modern culture. So
we have to do that. And the fact that he was intelligent enough, that intelligent IQ, to say, okay, this isn't right.
Yeah,
this is too easy. It's too convenient. Yeah. I need to make it a little tough on me. I got to push myself. Yeah. But a lot of people are just so comfortable that they won't push themselves out of it.
Mercy.
They won't push themselves out of it.
But it's funny, though. Spiritual warfare is so powerful. Because I think, we think spiritual warfare is just the temptation to smoke crack or use drugs or to do illicit sex. But it's really we are created for community. We're created for fellowship.
Wow.
But to create these systems and devices that literally drives us into isolation, it is spiritual warfare on a much higher plane because we don't attach a moral element to individualism or living in a silo where it's just, it's not sin, but it's just not a healthy human way to engage with the world. And it just works to our demise. John, I wanted to talk to you real quick as we talk about this, as we have the conversation on grief. Is there such a thing as good or healthy grief versus unhealthy grief? Or is there just grief? How do you know if this is a part of the process? This is, just a part of that season?
Yeah. Am I grieving well?
Right. Or have I crossed over into something that maybe is abnormal or out of the normal range of grief?
So God gave us the capacity to feel.
Gotcha.
That's good. And he's given us a roadmap, an instinctive roadmap to grieve. It's written in us. Everyone experiences it. So there's 5 stages to grief, right? So there's denial. That's that first stage where you're like, I don't know if I can accept this. I'm numb.
Can't believe this is happening.
Or I'm good. I'm good. I'm fine. It's all right. It's all right. It's okay. And then when you get out of that, you go into this bargaining stage. What could have I done differently? If I had just shown up more, if I would have spoken up more, if I would have stopped them from doing that, if they had just talked to me, I would have been able to help. Then there's the depression stage, which is recognizing the finality of death.
Never going to see them again.
I realized this is fine. They're not coming back. And this was hard. I mean, even as a counselor, when my grandmother died, someone paid her phone bill for 3 years. And I'm telling you, so what happened was one year, accidentally, I called her. And her voicemail picked up. And this is 2 years after she died.
Wow.
I'm there breaking down on the phone crying wait a minute. My grandmother's gone and I can hear her voice. So, that was a very depressive state because I'm like, no, this is final. Then we get angry because not now that we know it's final, we're like, why does it have to be? And then we can get to a stage of acceptance.
At who or whom?
Angry at a lot of things, but God included. Because why does death exist? What is death for? What's the purpose of death?
What is it for?
Yes. And so why would you take someone who is so good away from me? And so you start asking these questions and you're getting mad and you're asking these philosophical questions that only God can answer. And then you get to a stage of acceptance. Now, this is hardwired in us. And it doesn't always have to go in order. Our brain just knows how to navigate through it. That to me is a healthy process. Even though it looks ugly, it is healthy.
Yeah.
Where it gets unhealthy is when you refuse to move forward. You are refusing to feel anger. You're refusing to feel depression. You're refusing to bargain. You're refusing to move out of denial. You're refusing to accept. I mean, there's a lot of people who go through all those stages and they get to the point of acceptance, and there's every reason to accept it.
Yeah.
God has talked to them. People have talked to them. They know why they should accept it, but they want to hold on to that pain so badly because they think they're going to lose that person if they don't let that pain go. If they let that pain go, that they will not accept it.
Yeah.
They don't want to forget the person.
No, they don't want to forget, and they'll rather be in pain to remember them than set free and possibly forget them. Wow. So yeah, and it's hard helping someone navigate through that. Now I'll just say this: one thing I do when I work with people with grief, when they get to that stage, is help them build monuments. And I learned this from the Bible. I notice every time Israel or someone would leave captivity, God would tell them to build a monument to remind them. And I tell people, I said, get you some type of monument that reminds you of the good times with this person, what they've poured into you. Because, we believe, they're at rest.
Sure.
But their experiences that they gave you still live within you. You still can pull on their personality because their personality has been poured into you. So if you're like, I don't know what to do here, you can think about, well, almost like, what would Jesus do? What would grandma do? You have enough experiences with grandmother that you can almost imagine what she would do in this moment. Yes, she's gone. Yes, she's at rest. But she still poured into you.
Wow.
Information that you can use.
Sure.
And being able to tap into it. And once people get to that point.
Right. So we've only got 5 minutes left. Pastor Snell, we've heard, I think, John give us some really great advice about some steps to deal with this grief during this time.
Yep.
What advice do you have with all of your years of experience dealing with folks?
Yeah, so I think, I love what John said in that our minds intuitively walk us through this process. But I think the one thing, if I could just reiterate something that you said, was that it doesn't happen in that scripted order. Like it's not chronological. And so I think that there are times where sometimes when we have a sense of how it's supposed to go, we create this script in our head for what it's going to feel like, how long it's going to take. But the truth is that it is still an inexact science. Okay. I mean, you just don't know what smell is going to trigger it, what song is going to trigger it, what thought is going to trigger it. Something like just even hearing the voice in a voicemail that is no longer active is going to trigger it. I do think the one thing I would probably say is, and it's something I share with people all the time, is that you can't avoid grief. All you can do is store it. Like you can, you can distract yourself with busyness, with fun, with pleasure, with work. But all you're doing is you can sweep it under the carpet. You can save it. You can bank it. But it's going to collect interest. And and it's funny because if we would follow Scripture, we'd be such healthier, more whole people. In Scripture, when somebody died, they would actually take around 40 days, about 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And they would outwardly mourn with sackcloth and ashes. They would take a garment and rent it and tear it so that people kind of see where I am, and the community would rally around you. And it reminds me of what the Bible talks about, how there is a time and a season that should be dedicated to mourning. And because we don't really just follow that simple instruction or that simple template. Like we will lose a mom or a spouse or a dad and try to get back into the work rhythm, 4 or 5 days later or a week later. And that's just not how we are constructed, to deal with loss. And so what happens is, not that this 40 days or 6 weeks cancels all of it or deals with all of it, but it gives you a head start to the return or transition back into normal life. But because we try to jump right back into normal life and work and cooking and bills, I think the grief begins to come out of us in unhealthy, unforeseen ways over years. Yeah. And so I think the one thing I would probably just admonish people is to not avoid this, hide from it. Don't try to create false strength, whether it's bravado or even religion.
Okay, there you go.
Because at the end of the day, Jesus wept. You know what I'm saying? Right. He knew he was going to raise Lazarus, but yet he still wept at his demise.
Right.
So I just think that we just have to be mindful to not, use certain mechanisms to avoid what is a healthy process for us to be able to work through the losses we face.
So don't try. I like what before I go to Pastor Nugent, I just want to. You said don't even use religion, right? So don't hide behind.
Oh yeah.
Platitudes about God and prayer or whatever.
Yeah, and I'm not saying don't pray.
Right,
I'm not saying don't look to the Word to find solace and comfort and perspective. But what I mean when I say that is I remember I went to visit somebody, John, who had a very terrible loss, and I don't want to say too much, but there was another fellow minister in it of another denominational background, and grieving person was there. And he stepped into that space and he's like, don't cry. God is in control. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, no, you are painting a false narrative of how the gospel operates in tragedy.
Yeah.
Like, even like the truth, it doesn't take the ache out of pain. You see what I'm saying? Right. It just it gives us a perspective that helps us to look past the moment of pain to a greater hope and an eternal hope that we have in Christ Jesus. So what I mean when I say that is like faith does not make life stop hurting. Right. Knowing that Jesus is coming again, like that is reviving, that is encouraging. But in that moment, I'm still early in this season of grief, and I got to walk through that. Now, that hope is going to be one of the things that pulls me through, but it doesn't allow me to, kind of avoid it altogether.
Absolutely.
And so, one of the things I try to tell people is that religion is not Novocaine. You know what I'm saying? That's not what it is.
Okay.
It's alcohol. There's a cleansing agent to it. It burns, you know what I'm saying? But it's not Novocaine. It doesn't make it stop hurting.
Right.
Any final thoughts, Pastor Nugent?
Man, I would just speak to those that are not in the grieving realm of a life or a loved one. In my business, I get a chance to coach content creators, and some of the grief that I deal with on a regular, I mean, up to and including today, is that you haven't made it as far as you thought you should.
Yeah.
And you're in this mode of I should be further. I should be further. And so there's a real grief. I mean, it's arresting. It can be debilitating. That will set in if you let it. And I just love how, just kind of piggybacking on both of what you shared, there is an order to grief. It may not happen. There is a grief process, but it may not happen in that order.
Yeah.
And it's the same with whatever your professional exploits, personal exploits. Maybe you're trying to lose some weight. I don't know what it is, what goals you set. Around this time of year, a lot of us get into reflective mode, and we recognize I'm not as far along as I would have liked to be. Didn't quite, save as much. Financially, I'm not where, relationally, I'm not where I want to be. And you will really bog down yourself. This is a moment and a space where I really believe we need to apply and give ourselves as much grace as God gives us.
Yeah, that's a good word.
To make it through this particular season. To make it through this particular season.
I love that word, grace. That's the ultimate salve.
That's it.
That's the ultimate medication.
That's it. That's
accepting God's grace. Well, brothers, another great and I think extremely important conversation. Many of you out there, I'm sure, can relate to what has been discussed today. We hope that you'll take what the pastors have said and what our friend John Ruffin has said to heart and apply it during this holiday season. Grief and loneliness may try to settle in, but work it through the processes. And don't forget, to stop, pray, and breathe.
Breathe is produced by David Person for Breath of Life. Executive producer is Debleaire Snell, and sound engineer is Kirk Nugent. Audio episodes of Breathe can be found on Apple, Spotify, or Google Podcast platforms. For video episodes and extra content, check out the Breath of Life YouTube channel. Breath of Life is faith-based content, resources, and programs from a contemporary urban perspective for those looking for hope and guidance. We believe that every breath we take is a testimony that God is consistent, that He loves us, and has a plan for our lives.